I started to realize that it turns out that the biggest impediment to business growth and business success isn't the lack of a good strategy. It isn't that we don't have good pricing people. It's not that we don't have people who can execute. What we have is a lack of motivation. We have individuals who are not fully engaged in their work, and they can't really get behind all the strategy and execution and pricing and everything else you want to go do because they don't feel excited about coming to work every day. So what motivates me to do this work with Bonafide Leaders is to work with leaders, because I believe if you change the leader, you change everything or a lot of things within the organization. And so I like working with leaders to help them understand maybe their gaps as well as their strengths and how they can use those better to help generate and lead more effective teams. Welcome. You are listening to Season 3 of the Bonafide Leaders podcast, a podcast that exists to inspire legitimate and authentic leadership in the workplace and beyond. And I'm your host, Tim G. Williams. This season's theme is the intersection, sports, business, and leadership, which happen to be three of my greatest loves on earth. Now, if you don't play sports, you've never played sports, or you don't like sports, don't tune out. This podcast is for you too. I promise there will be nuggets for everyone. All right, welcome in to another edition of the Bonafide Leaders podcast, and I am your host, Tim G. Williams. Typically, I am your host. Today, we're going to do things a little bit different. I've got Aaron with me, and we're going to dive into a couple of topics as we get ready to have today's conversation. So, Aaron, over to you.
Yeah, we're kicking off a new season. Very excited to be here.
Yes.
This one, before we get into what the season's about, let's take a step back and really talk about Bonafide Leaders.
Yeah.
Because it's a year now into the podcast, right? It's been growing. So, for those who may be just learning about you for the first time, coming across your brand, let's back up and first of all share who you are and what your story and your journey is about to be here.
Yeah. All right, so go way back to how I was raised, because I think how we're raised, those formative years, play a really, really big role in, I know they have for me, in how we think and how we live. And so for me, I was raised by a divorced mom of two. And growing up in that home, my mom was strict. She was tough, but she was also, I would say, really loving and fair. And so I felt like me and my brother had a really good balance. I knew that I was loved. I knew that I was cared for. Our wants, we didn't really have so many of those wants, right? Things we really wanted. But in terms of needs, needs were always met. She was an incredible woman. And she taught us really some great values I feel like have really stuck with me. So one of those values was working hard. So we couldn't go and play until our work was done. And you get home, you can have 10, 15 minutes to kind of chill out, get a snack, what have you. And then you get to the work, right? Get your homework done. And so that was a really big thing. And, as a result, I had a job, my first job when I was 14 years old, digging trenches in Fort Worth, Texas for irrigation systems out in the sun, and worked really every year all the way through the time that I eventually went to college and got my first job. Anyway, so hard work was one. Another was the value of education. So my mom was the first in her family to go to college, graduate from college. And even before that, it's kind of related because I'm going to talk about diversity in a second. My mom grew up in segregated Memphis, Tennessee. She marched with Dr. King. So when we talk about, Black History Month, for example, the month that we're in right now, these things I have a great appreciation for because my mom lived it. And then I think it was her junior year is when she was actually forced to be bused into an integrated school, right? And so first time she had teachers that looked different than her and classmates who were different from her, and their first experience with that too. And so that was how we grew up. And like I said, she taught us, I think, some great lessons. And I just think now, I'm a parent of two kids, and I cannot imagine raising them by myself. And so I saw in my mom a living example of someone who was really, really committed to the process of raising young men and doing all that she could to surround us with the right influences. And so I'm very grateful to her for that. So that's like me, formative years, early years.
a little bit more into the journey of that's a great foundation.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what she instilled in you. So talk a little bit too about that foundation to where you are today, like going to college, believing in yourself enough to go for the leadership roles that you did take on, all of that. Like, how was that formative? How did those formative years shape you?
Yeah. So 3 big pillars, faith, diversity, and team. Those are 3 things that I remember being instilled in me very early on. So my mom was a Christian woman. She raised us with biblical values. We were trained to treat people with respect and no matter who they were, no matter where they came from. So that was a really big thing. Diversity. I mean, we grew up in a lot of different environments. And I don't have enough time to kind of unpack that, but lots of different environments with lots of different schoolmates. And that was a blessing for me. So that helped like formulate some of the way that I think. And then team, which we'll talk about a little bit later, playing on sports teams was a big early thing for me. And being on those sports teams, it taught me the value of, what I think is said at Paul Quinn College, we over me. And there's no I in team. And seeing the reality that if you put the sum of the parts together, the individual pieces, while beautiful and brilliant, man, there's nothing like a team coming together. And the way that she operated our home is the same way. We operated as a team. We had family meetings. I had my responsibilities in the kitchen. My brother had his responsibilities for the trash, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that gave me what I needed to be able to start to think about, okay, what does college look like? What does a career look like? And for me, college was something that was definitely expected for me and my brother. But in terms of the means to make that happen, that was missing.
Okay. You had to do it. Yeah.
Money was like, wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
And so we knew at a fairly early, I don't know when I actually kind of got it, but probably by the time I was a sophomore or junior in high school, I definitely knew that my path to college was through the scholarship route. And it was just a matter of what kind of scholarships was I going to be able to compete for. And fortunately for me, I was able to get actually a combination of academic and athletic scholarships throughout the process. So those values, those experiences, they really shaped the way I've thought about my life, my career, pursuing college, getting through college and getting a job. Yeah.
I love it. Any other shaping for who you, like what you stand for or your values?
Yeah. So Bonafide Leaders, we really focus on 3 key values. Excellence, again, a trait that was instilled in me very early on. My mom would say, look, don't do it unless you're going to do it right. And that was instilled very early on. So excellence, integrity, right? Being the same person in front of you as I am with a group of leaders that I'm coaching or that I'm doing some leadership development with. It's showing up the same way for my kids, the same way I show up for my wife. Integrity was very big. And then the last one for Bonafide Leaders is continuous improvement. I just believe that in order to improve, you've got to learn, which means you probably might make some mistakes. But the key for me throughout my whole career, just going through a lot of different roles, was how can I continue to learn and get better and improve? So the business values are really those 3. We focus a lot on continuous learning, continuous improvement, leveraging artificial intelligence in the business to grow the business, to market the business, etc. And then, like I said, excellence and integrity. Those are the real pillars. So yeah, that's kind of the way I like to think about the values that I bring to the business.
Okay, so you get to college and we find the means. you obey your mom and you find the means.
Yeah.
What happened after that? Again, it takes a lot for you to go from the beginnings to where you grew into for your career. So can you talk about that path? And again, aligning values, aligning that foundation to keep you going and keep you growing, essentially.
Yeah. So I end up being a finance major, but through the process, I collected a lot of hours, Aaron, because I was transferring. So I transferred 3 different times, and I have transcripts from 6 undergraduate institutions because I did some remote learning stuff way back then. So unfortunately, for a 120-hour degree, I had to get 157 hours. I mean, so not everything transferred, right? So I had to take a lot of classes twice. And that's a part of the story because that built some resilience, some perseverance, some grit, some mental fortitude that a lot of students don't have to face. So first, earning money, right, to be able to go to college, and then two, having to work through the ups and the downs of, chasing a dream, and then that dream not kind of coming together the way you want it. So I get a finance degree, and after that, I was fortunate enough to interview with a lot of companies. It was a great time to be hired back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And Texas Instruments, a semiconductor company, which I was familiar with. They were based in Dallas, where I grew up. And so I thought, yeah, okay, they're on the list. And the interview on campus at Texas A&M, where that was the last school that I went to, was just different. It felt very comfortable. And then I did an on-campus interview at TI, and that also felt really, really just comfortable. The people were down to earth. You could tell they were intelligent and smart and worked very hard, but just down to earth people. And so I thought, this is a good fit for me. So I ended up going to TI. I worked in accounting job, my first job. Then I did a dual accounting and finance job, my second job. Did finance, accounting, operations, and then eventually I got promoted to manager. So I had these different roles of increasing levels of responsibility. At some point, they merged finance and operations so that I had all that responsibility. So the accounting, the finance, and the operations people reported to me. And then from there, I got to lead corporate FP&A, so financial planning and analysis for what was at the time about a $13 billion enterprise. And so all the financial statements, balance sheet, cash flow statement, P&L, I was responsible for racking up all those numbers at the corporate level, working with manufacturing, working with the business teams, working with the market analyses, investors, what do they think, what are they expecting, and ultimately projecting revenue and earnings per share to the street, and working with our investor relations team. So did that job, was blessed to go out to California and headed up what was called finance and operations for about a $1.5–2 billion business. And in that role was a lot of post-acquisition integration type of work that I did there. And then came back to Dallas to do a similar role, just a bigger business with a more expanded portfolio, had about $3 billion in revenue and more people. So my time at TI, I think I gained 3 skills that I think are really relevant to how I think about Bonafide Leaders today. One is business partnering and advising. The second is in, I'll call it executive leadership. And the third is in people development, organizational leadership, right? Those 3 areas I spent a significant amount of time with. So business partnership, for example, my very first job in TI, I supported the public affairs leadership team. That's the group that goes out and makes all the checks, right, to all the local organizations, community organizations that need funds, right, to keep them afloat. Education initiatives, all that kinds of stuff. I supported our communications and our investor relations team. And I did all the accounting and all the finance for that stuff, but I was a partner, right? I was the finance or accounting person right in the middle of all of their activities, helping them get their budgets aligned to ensure that they met their goals and their objectives internally and externally, while also having a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders and keeping those numbers in line. And I was a partner, not just in that first role, but in every role after that. So I worked with IT and sales and product engineering and new product development engineering and marketing and all these different entities, HR, to ultimately help run the businesses. And so the partnership aspect of what I did was a big part. My last role, I was a strategic advisor to our CEO, my very last role at the company. So advising leaders, working with leaders, that's a big part. I think that's helpful in terms of translatable skill. The other thing that I talked about is being an organizational leader. And so I've been blessed to lead hundreds and hundreds of people, global teams, people in Malaysia and China and Tucson, Arizona, and all over the world. And with that comes an understanding that everybody's a little bit different and everybody has different needs. And along with that, I decided to take what I had learned and go teach others. So at SMU, local school here, I work with the MBA program there and the Business Leadership Center, and I've been an instructor there for over a decade. So that kind of part of me. And then the last part is just executive leadership. So as an executive leader, I've been blessed to travel all over the world. I've been blessed to lead R&D investment, determine where we need to maybe flex less, spend more, spend dollars here or there, acquisitions, analysis of acquisitions, restructurings, reorganizations. Have been through dozens of those and have led many of those. And so that executive leadership team, being a member of the Finance Executive Council, it gave me a very big picture understanding of how a corporation, how an organization works, how it functions, and how the parts kind of come together. And again, going back to the early experience, being on a lot of teams, all that stuff is, I think, useful now as I think about the Bonafide Leaders business moving forward and the clients that I work with.
All right. So having all this experience and working with these corporations, these, the leaders and helping them, there's a lot to, from a coaching perspective, telling people what they can do and laying it all out. You've been there, right? We're parents. We know how well people listen to our experience. But what's your secret to motivation? What's your secret to helping these people really see the potential and then evolving into it?
Yeah. So really it starts with my motivation, right? What gets me up in the morning and excited about this business? That's the key. Before I can help anybody else, right? I've got to put my mask on and understand what's my purpose. What's the reason that I'm doing this? And for me, over so many years, Aaron, I would talk to people confidentially. They would come sit in my office. We'd have a career conversation, and I would be exposed to so much that I didn't know existed. And one of the things I would hear a lot of is, I'm not getting developed over here. Or I want to grow my career over here, but I don't know if I can talk to my supervisor about it. Or my boss is really hard to talk to. They just don't listen very well, et cetera, right? You can just fill in the blank on all these different conversations. So over time, although I loved business and operations and negotiating supply agreements and capacity agreements and, the P&L and all that kinds of stuff, I started to realize that it turns out that the biggest impediment to business growth and business success isn't the lack of a good strategy. It isn't that we don't have good pricing people. It's not that we don't have people who can execute. What we have is a lack of motivation. We have individuals who are not fully engaged in their work, and they can't really get behind all the strategy and execution and pricing and everything else you want to go do because they don't feel excited about coming to work every day. So what motivates me to do this work with Bonafide Leaders is to work with leaders, because I believe if you change the leader, you change everything or a lot of things within the organization. And so I like working with leaders to help them understand maybe their gaps as well as their strengths and how they can use those better to help generate and lead more effective teams. That's a big part of why I do what I do. In terms of coaching, right, I spend time with people. And the very early part of what we do is we talk about, what do you want to get from this experience? And it's only through maybe alignment with their leader, sometimes HR if I'm doing a sponsored agreement, or if it's individual, just them. What feedback have you heard? What assessments have you taken? Would it make sense for us to do a self-assessment now or 360 to just round out the feedback? And now we can talk about, where does it you want to go? Why you want to go there, and what difference is it going to go make for you, for your team, for your organization. So whether it's me coaching a CEO, a director at a big old company, a small business owner, all those folks I work with, I coach. And really it's about me understanding my motivation, my why, to be able to help those folks then go be the absolute best that they can be. And that's really my passion. My passion is to help leaders, their teams, their organizations be the absolute best they can be, whether they're big, whether they're small, whether they're cash cow, whether they're growing, whether they're flatlining. I just want you to be the very best you can be and make the impact you want to make in your market. And if I can do that, I feel fulfilled.
All right. So working with you specifically, I love the motivation side of things and why somebody would want to work with you. Because like you said, a lot of times we know what we're supposed to do, right? There's so much to that. So from a perspective of working with you specifically, what sort of problems do you solve? And there's a lot of executive coaches. There's a lot of, others we can turn to. Why you specifically and the problems you help with.
So let me address the second question first. Why Bonafide Leaders? So in this field, and again, I've done a lot of competitive analysis throughout my whole career, SWOT analysis, right? Understanding where there's strengths, where there's weaknesses, opportunities, threats, etc. And it's dominated primarily by women, and it's dominated primarily by white women, coincidentally. And as a Black man, I believe that I offer a perspective that is really exceptionally unique, particularly given my background as a finance and operations executive. That's pretty rare. Second, with academic grounding, meaning that I've gone back to school to University of Texas at Dallas, got my executive coaching certificate, took it a step further, became a credential coach through the International Coaching Federation. So I didn't just rely upon what I've gotten in my own corporate world. The other piece is, again, I'm teaching MBAs real time on a regular basis. So I've got my ear and nose to the ground, if you will, on what exactly is happening in the marketplace, the industries where folks are kind of moving to. And I've got the practical experience of having led and having done it and having sat in the very seat of the people with whom I'm working with. So I get them. I understand them. And there's a relatability factor. So for all those reasons, I think the Bonafide Leaders business is exceptionally unique and provides a value and a perspective that is not often gotten. As a employee, I received coaching at least 2 formal times, 9 months or more, something like that. And in both cases, it was that demographic that I mentioned who coached me. Did they do a good job? Absolutely. In fact, I'm still in contact with both of them today. At the same time, that's not to say there's not opportunities for people who maybe come from a different background, have a different perspective that could potentially add maybe a unique value to those employees in the organization who may look like me, may not look like me, but come from a different background. And I just think that that is something that is unique and valuable. Now, you asked me another question. I've forgotten all about what that first question was.
The problems you solve.
Yeah. Problems I solve. So typically from a coaching perspective, people are coming to me because they want growth. They feel stuck either from a career perspective. So one individual I'm thinking of right now, they were in a director level role at a really big company and they felt stuck in that director level box and they wanted to go to the next level, which was a vice president role. So part of what we did together is helped that individual provide an understanding of what they wanted in their career, put some solid pieces of understanding down on paper, and then help them actually get that job 3 months from the time that we ended coaching. I work with people who just need to sort of systematize themselves. There's one individual I'm thinking of now who was a CEO and just needed to be grounded. They were sort of all over the place. They had real strength in marketing, but needed to make sure they spent the right amount of time in operations and finance, and their work hours were all over the place, and it was just really, really chaotic. And so part of what we did was develop a plan to help them systemize. So work-life balance, sometimes that's one of the other things that we work through from a coaching perspective. When it comes to leadership development, the consulting, typically it's leaders who realize that there's some gap, right, or a lid, if you will, on their leadership capability. Or it's people who are already doing really well and they just want to add some new skills to their toolkit. They want to be more effective in the way that they're impacting their team, in the way they're managing up, in the way they're managing across. And what I do is I work through a variety of different leadership packages is what I say that I offer. Same thing with consulting, right? So getting with a group of leaders in a room, whiteboarding, talking about your mission, your vision, your values. Maybe they want to create a new college graduate rotational program, something I happen to lead, right, for 5 years that is directly applicable to what it is they're trying to go do. Or maybe they've got operating results that are below their expectation. So we can talk about whether it's the top line or whether it's the cost element, right? How do we get those things out? It could be a company that is struggling because they're going through hyper growth. And they now need some systems and structure to sort of move from the kid phase to the adult phase, right, of their life cycle. Those are the different types of sort of problems that Bonafide Leaders solves for. And again, at the end of it, it's all about helping those companies, those organizations, those individuals be the best that they can be, leveraging the experience that I feel like I've gotten and being able to share it with them. And also just listen. A big part of coaching is just being a thought partner, listening, reflecting, holding up the mirror, and helping people maybe see things that they didn't see about themselves when they first came. Bonafide Leaders works with emerging leaders, established leaders, and executives. We exist to help you, your teams, and your business thrive, specializing in executive coaching, leadership development, organizational consulting, and keynote speaking services. Providing the absolute highest level of quality and service, we partner with our clients to help them grow, elevate their leadership effectiveness, navigate organizational change, culture, and leadership transitions, to advance employee engagement and retention, and raise bottom-line operations. If these are the kinds of problems you're seeking to solve and you're humble, hungry, and coachable, we might be a good fit. If that's you, reach out to me at bonafideleaders.com/contact.
All right, so let's go into season 3. Yeah. I'm very excited about this just because we are talking about the alignment with leaders to sports. I know you have a history in sports, still an athlete. Once an athlete, always an athlete, right?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes. Let's talk about what we can expect this season and why this topic was, last season we talked about making the leap. This one we're talking about the sports. So why this topic specifically and what made you want to do this now?
All right. So first things first, for my non-sports people, you want to check out right now. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, this is for everyone. I believe there's going to be some powerful nuggets for everyone, whether you play sports today, whether you hate sports, whether you didn't grow up playing sports or not. I just believe that sports and life are so connected. Mm-hmm. If we take the time to just look at it, think about it, and really for this entire season, that's what I'm hoping to do, is to sort of just unpack how, not only from my perspective, but from the perspective of all the incredible guests that we're going to have, how did sports impact you? The way that you think, the way that you solve problems, how you handle business, how you lead. For me, it's made a really, really big impact. And it just so happens that this thing that we're calling the intersection, right? Sports, business, and leadership happen to be 3 of my favorites in the world, outside of Tex-Mex and travel and some other things like that. So yeah, I'm very excited because I've never done, I'll call it an exclusive on these topics.
Yeah.
And this is my first time to really dive into it. And I'm really excited about that.
Very cool. And what do you want the listener to really come away with for this season?
I want the listener to see and connect the dots in the way that I think I have. That, you know what, even if you're raising kids today, and maybe you didn't play sports growing up, or you got niece and nephew, or you're a grandparent, I hope that people are able to take away there's some real value with just participating. And even if you're not participating, even if you don't plan to do it forever, there's something about even a lifestyle, right? Having a healthy lifestyle, making healthy choices that I think is useful for anyone who's listening. And there's a whole set of skills that I think you can gain no matter what side you're on of it. I know today we're going to focus on the player side, if you will, but there's a lot of different roles you can have in this world of sports. And sports, by the way, I mean, it's a huge business. It's a mega business. Mm-hmm. And we happen to be in a city, Dallas-Fort Worth, where I got to believe we're in one of the top 4 or 5 media markets in general. And I got to believe we're one of the top 3 or 4 sports markets, right? Whether you talk about youth sports, right? You go all over this area, you can not help but see a baseball field, soccer. I mean, it's just all over the place. All the indoor sports that people have now, basketball, volleyball, all the club teams, etc., all the way up to the professional ranks with the Mavericks and the Stars and WNBA team and baseball. The Rangers just won the World Series. So I feel like this time is also a good time for us to just kind of dive into this particular topic.
Yeah, I'm such a huge believer in I just had this conversation with my son. It's just about why sports is so incredible, because you take something that you're not sure that you can do. You have to. And I told him there will be nothing in your life that's easy at this point. Like, you have to work at everything you do to get to where you want to go. And sports is that perfect lifelong lesson of, I'm not, even the most gifted athletes have to work to get to the next level.
No question.
You have to.
No question. So, and what's really funny, of course, is that I've actually coached your son. So
yeah. Yeah. You know my pain. Oh my gosh, you know my pain. Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So how about for you? Earliest memories with sports? Like, obviously it had a huge impact on your life.
Yeah. I was thinking about this in preparation. And for me, I'm trying to think like the very first memory. I didn't even know I was doing sports. But where I grew up in Louisiana, all the kids in the neighborhood, we flipped So whether that's a front flip or back flip, there were the power surge generators. I'm not sure what you call them, the little green boxes in the neighborhood. We would do flips off of that. Like, it's just what every kid did. We played this game called throw up football.
You did everything no parent wants their child to do, but keep going.
With my glasses on. Yeah, it was a mess. I remember a Converse commercial with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Yeah, and it was like you could get the purple and gold, or you could get the green and black and white, you know? So those are some of the like early memories. I remember going to my grandparents' house in Houston, and all the cousins, I have like 17 first cousins. So we would go down there like around May, June, soon as school let out. And I just remember watching the finals, and whether it was Detroit Pistons or the Lakers, or whoever, right? Yeah. The Celtics back in those days. So those are just some of the early memories that I have from sports.
Yeah. And what sports did you end up playing?
All right, so I'm laughing because, okay, so this was not organized, but there's this thing called wall ball.
Yeah.
Remember wall ball?
I remember wall ball.
Right, yeah, so wall ball was real cool. Bunch of kids behind some line, and then you have to throw the ball at the wall, and then if you actually try to catch the ball and you drop it, now you got to go run to the wall before somebody, pegs you with the ball. So that was like the very first sport I remember playing. Kickball at recess. I used to love kickball, man. Kickball is like my favorite game. And then I would try to play basketball. This is like 4th, 5th grade. I'm in Louisiana, and I remember getting kicked off the court.
Really?
Yes, because apparently I didn't understand the rules. And, one of the rules with basketball, Aaron, you've been a basketball player, is that apparently you have to dribble with like one hand at a time. And I was into the 2-dribble thing for a little bit.
Role, yes.
And so they would actually kick me off the court. The older kids, they didn't want me. They called me all kind of names. And then we moved here to Texas, and I actually got on my first sports team, which was a basketball team in 6th grade. We were running Rebels, okay? And we were cold. We won the city championship in 6th grade. I did not contribute in a meaningful way. I was what you would call a role player, or let's just be honest, I was on the bottom of the bench.
Were you at least one hand dribbling at this point? Did you at least advance to that?
Yeah, I was working on that a little bit.
All right.
Still a struggle, but Coach Green was our coach, and he taught the fundamentals of the game. And so I finally began to like understand this thing that I thought I loved, right? I saw the commercials. I remember Michael Jordan, a couple years later, he came out with that video, Come Fly With Me. And I used to think, oh my God, he is flying, right? So I loved the game of basketball. But then when I got to, this would have been junior high. I don't know if the coaches make you or if I was voluntold, I don't remember, but I did track and field. I remember long jumping. I remember doing like an 800 meters. I think they just throw you out there, right? You do stuff. And then I also picked up football. So I played quarterback. I was a quarterback as well as a linebacker for our junior high football team. So at that point, it was 3 sports through junior high.
What was the journey like from a perspective of, going from benchwarmer, we'll call it, basketball, to I'm assuming that you had some natural gifts, but going to a level where you could play into college. What were those lessons you were learning through high school about development and, really learning, I have this, but I want to get to this, what it takes?
Well, first of all, it's a lot of rejection. Let's just keep it real, right? I sucked. Like I was doo-doo. Like I was horrible as a basketball player.
Okay.
I just loved it, but I was not good.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was not good. 6th grade. 7th grade, because I just would watch so much, like Isaiah Thomas. He was such a great dribbler. Number 11, that's the number that I wore. I just practiced a lot, Aaron.
Yeah.
So I remember vividly before school and after school, because this was before we had a hoop at my place. I would just practice like everything I saw on TV. And I think that practice without knowing it was just getting me better and better and better to the point where by the time I got to the 9th grade, I was a starter on the A team.
Wow.
Woo! Big jump.
Yeah, that's a huge jump.
And then, in the high school, I was still a late bloomer. So I didn't really hit my height until the summer between my junior and senior year. And I was at a high school where the coach greatly favored upperclassmen. And we had a lot of upperclassmen. So even my junior year, I played on varsity just a little bit. We had a JV team, which is kind of crazy. So I was really a late bloomer. But I was also getting some supplemental work. So the city of Arlington, where I grew up, was okay. There were some good basketball players. But I had a teammate of mine who told me, hey, man, if you really want to get better, you need to come with me in the summers and in the spring out to Dallas. And so I began playing at the Beckley Center Recreation Center. Those listeners who are from that area, Oak Cliff, they love it. They know it. It's a very special place in my heart and for a lot of people. That's where I began to develop a toughness. So a skill and a toughness with the game. And being with those players, most of which, like the name of the team was called the Dirty Dozen.
Ooh.
And those 12 guys, all of them had college scholarships.
Wow.
So I didn't make that team. I made like the second or the third team, depending on what tournament that we would play in.
Yeah.
And I think they were my inspiration too, because that's where I wanted to be. So by the time I got to my senior year, there was a bit of a fire that was lit. I was properly motivated, and I knew my coach would sort of give the green light to the seniors. So I became a captain of the team, set a couple records in terms of shooting stuff, was the offensive, I think, MVP for our district, all region, all this kind of stuff. And it all happened because I think I just practiced and I didn't give up. I could have given up, but I just loved the game. And I think that's a lesson, is that passion for something, if you're willing to put in the work, will eventually reward you.
Yeah. And
that was definitely what happened to me.
That's awesome. And how did that parlay into becoming a college student athlete?
So there's a story to everything. College student athlete. I was a late bloomer. So now it's a little bit different. But when I was in high school, probably by your junior year, by middle of your junior year, if you were going to be a D1 basketball player, you probably were starting to get pretty good attention. And certainly between your junior and senior year, you would have had some offers. And that was not my story. I think I had one or two Division I schools reach out. Remember, the University of Ohio was one of them. There was a school in North Carolina A&T. There was a school that I was recruiting myself to, Howard University in Washington, D.C. But ultimately, none of those were working out. And so at one point, I was thinking about going to junior college, again, because you're talking about a means thing, right?
Yeah.
I can't pay my way to a 4-year institution and try to walk on. Like, that's just not an option. Didn't have the money. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll go to junior college route. So there was a school called Trinity Valley, which still produces great athletes. There was a guy who ended up playing for the Washington Redskins later on. He could jump out the gym, wide receiver. AC, I think. I can't remember his actual first and last name, but he was on the visit that I took. He was like one of my hosts. Anyway, none of that worked out. So it's like May or June of my senior year.
Wow.
We have already graduated from high school and I don't know where I'm going.
Wow.
That's a bad feeling. Right? Can you imagine for our kids?
No.
Being in that situation?
Yeah.
So I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I was, again, shopping myself around, shopping videos. And this school from the East Coast, it was an HBCU, Historically Black College and University, showed some interest. And they were like, look, we have all our athletic scholarships that are taken, but your grades are good enough and your SAT is good enough that we can actually get you on the team with academic scholarship. And I'm like, okay, that was a foreign thought to me at that point, but it really worked out. So I ended up going to that school. And I got a general academic scholarship and the Thurgood Marshall scholarship, which actually was really sweet because there was so much money that was coming in. The school was actually paying me. I was getting like a little stipend.
Nice.
So yeah, I was at that school and that's kind of the first journey. I really thought, Aaron, that I would go to the NBA. I learned pretty quickly that with my height, being 6 foot, 6'1", I was always the shortest guy on the team. And everybody was just as fast as me, just as strong as me, could jump generally just as high as I could shoot as well as I could dribble as well as I could. I realized probably the NBA is not going to be for me. In fact, my assistant coach challenged us to play him 1 versus 2. He had been cut by the Detroit Pistons, the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was the last man cut, but he was great overseas in France. So he was like France Player of the Year. You think about Victor Wembanyama, and you think about the guy who used to play with Minnesota Timberwolves. I can't remember his name, but those guys came out of that same French league, Tony Parker. So it was a really good league. And yet he could not make an NBA team. And guess what? He beat us 1-2.
Wow.
I realized, okay, NBA is probably not going to be it. It's a very painful pill to swallow, but that was the reality. So I continued to pursue. I transferred to New Mexico Military Institute. Long story short, there is that the National Junior College Administration or Associate Athletic Administration and the NCAA both ruled me ineligible to play at that institution because I had played in some, what we called not recreation games, but
intramural?
Like not intramural. They were games with an official, but it wasn't a public record game. There was like a warm up, kind of a preseason game. Anyway, the coach at that school didn't really do the proper due diligence to understand that, if you play in these exhibition games, that's what they were called.
Okay.
If you play in so many of them, they're actually counted as a full season.
Yeah,
it's horrible. Horrible. It's completely different than some of the benefits that the kids get today. Like they got an extra COVID year. You can even play as a football player in like multiple games and still have that year not count against you. So the rules are much better now. But at that time, it didn't work out. And then I went to a school in West Texas, played there for all of a semester. And by then, the door was kind of closing. And so my mom ends up meeting this guy on an airplane. He's an executive at, I think, Baxter, I think was a pharmaceutical company at the time. And he's like, hey, I recruit college students, but I recruit them when I come to Texas out of 2 schools, UT and A&M. So if your son is really serious about his, getting a finance degree and kind of getting into business, he ought to consider one of those 2 schools. And so I applied to both. UT, all the UT listeners, let me tell you what happened. They claimed they lost my application. They never received it. So A&M fortunately received my application and they accepted me. So
A&M it was. Yeah.
There you go. That's how I wound up at A&M. So after that, I just played intramurals, did not play on the official college basketball team, but I'm proud to say that my intramural team, we were regional intramural champions across the Southeast. And we actually got a expense paid free trip to LA to play for the national championship at USC in the Great Western Forum. My best buddies, my senior year, and we got 3rd in the nation.
That's awesome.
In intramural. So anyway, it was redeemed, but it was kind of a mess all the way through it.
Yeah. Well, everything happens for a reason, right?
It does.
So what are some of your favorite sports memories or like stories you have as a player?
Oh my goodness, stories. So there's like the on the court and there's the off the court. I don't know about for you, but for me, I remember way more the off the court stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, there's so many stories. So I had some characters, some crazy teammates and teammates from literally all over the world. I had a Brazilian teammate. I'll tell you that story. I had a teammate from Eastern Europe, teammates from the Bahamas, teammates from New York, Arizona, Maryland, DC, Georgia, rural places, big city place, Chicago. And so the Brazilian teammate, he one time got sick. So this was a funny moment to me. His English wasn't so good. And frankly, we don't know how old he was.
Okay.
He looked like he was way older than us.
Some gray hair? Is that?
He had no hair.
Okay.
Already bald, right?
Okay.
At whatever age he was. But my Brazilian teammate one time got sick. And I remember being really cold. He's like, Tim, now let me speak in his voice. Team, I need something for my cold, right? So we go to the local store and, we get some Robitussin or Dimetapp or I don't know, NyQuil or whatever it was. Team. And so he's coughing really bad. And I'm like, okay, calm down, man. We're going to be all right. But he's clearly very concerned about his health. Again, English is not the best. And so he does not look at the instructions. But I'm like, what is he doing? Maybe he's going to do something. I don't know what he's going to do. But there's a cap at the top of that thing, right? You're supposed to pour the liquid in. No, not my teammate. I'll call him Jay. Jay said, took it right to the head. And I'm like, Jay, you can't do that. Team, I'm sick. I got to have. So That was a hilarious moment. Fortune was able to save him from ODing on the
Just had half the bottle. Wow.
That was a story. There's a story one time at the end of practice, basketball practice, there was some beef going on with two members of the team. And at the end of a practice, you do the huddle and you say 1, 2, 3 in your mascot or 1, 2, 3 team or whatever, right? So we go 1, 2, 3. And instead of hearing whatever we were supposed to say, all you heard was,
they hit each other.
And so if you're not watching on YouTube, you're just listening. Yeah, that was a nice round right hand to the jaw of the other player. And everybody was just like, whoa, thrown off. Like, what's going on? Oh my, we're just looking around. And our coach, who claimed to be Mr. Everybody's Equal, but clearly things were not equal. He would give a jacket to certain players, and it was a mess. The inconsistency with this particular player, this particular coach. But yeah, he pretended as if he would just walk away and didn't see anything. The next day at practice, we're like, hey, what are we going to do about the fight between such and such? I didn't see it. So it's stuff like that. One time I had some teammates who were involved in some activities, which may or may not have been legal. Let's just put it that way. I don't know truly to this day because I technically never saw anything, but let me tell you what I did see. We got back from a road game. It's like 2 a.m. Walking back to our dorm area. It's like a suite setup. There's 4 of us to live in this suite. And it's 2 or 3 in the morning, and you can see that glass has been broken and our door is open and it's got clear marks of like a shovel. Somebody has clearly taken to this thing. And then you go into the back and it's just like the movies. I had never seen this before in my life. The bed was cut up, fluffs everywhere. TV was completely disassembled because whoever decided to go and look in our place was looking for something very specific.
Oh my gosh.
That was kind of terrifying.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's so many stories. I could go on and on and on, all good and all bad. The point is that what helped me is that I got to just be around people who are different than me.
Yeah.
And came from different walks of life. And that is a very transferable skill.
Yeah. And how have you taken those skills to today where basically you use them on a daily, a weekly basis and transferred to how you lead today?
Yeah. There's a few skills, right, that you pick up when you're playing sports. One of them I talked about already, like perseverance. You get told no a lot. You don't make a team. You want to make the A team. Instead, you make the B team. That happened to me in 7th grade, probably 8th grade too. And you guess what? I don't get every client or prospective client that I want to convert to a client. That's a part of it. So I think being able to lose, but lose gracefully and not put your head down and quit is a really, really important skill, particularly as a small business owner, right? You're pursuing opportunities. You don't know what's going to land. You don't know what's going to hit sometimes. And I think being able to, having been in a lot of games that are close or that are contentious, and you lose the game, and after the game, you still have to go and shake the hand of the other player. Yeah. That's something that is a very useful skill. One of the things that I don't remember having to do, but if you watch an NBA game, the players are interviewed immediately after the game. I used to always tell people that work would say I call it crazy stuff because they just didn't understand.
Right.
There's a lot, right? When you don't understand something, you say all kind of crazy things. And so, some player would say something that got the paper and it was offensive to someone or what have you. And the person would be like, I can't believe they said that. Who would say that? Those guys are so spoiled. They make all this money and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that may be true. That may be factually true. They make a lot of money and there may be some players who are spoiled. Let me also tell you what's true. When they have their worst day and their worst moment and someone puts a microphone in your face and says, talk to us.
And ask a stupid question.
Right.
Yeah.
You tell me on your worst day at the job here how well that would sit for you. And by the way, it's broadcast not just to your family, not just to the people who work here at this company, but it's broadcast around the world globally.
Yeah.
Guess what? Sometimes we open our mouths and we insert our foot. We say something we wish we didn't in the moment. We do something we wish we wouldn't have done in the moment. And that's the reality of sports. And so I think just being able to have a mindset to try to have kind of I'll call it an even kill, right? Win or lose, whether I love my teammates, whether I'm not real great friends with my teammates, whether things are going really well for me, I'm getting a lot of playing time or I'm not. Then there's something else I'll just close with, which was as a basketball player at the first school I went to, the basketball team had to unfortunately be the cross country team. So technically I've got letters in two sports because the school per the NCAA requires you to have a minimum number of sports in order to be eligible for all the NCAA, whatever. And so we didn't have a cross country team. So our basketball coach offered us up as the cross country team, basketball players. Now, here's the bad part about that. I hate running. To this day, I went for a run yesterday. I do it only because I know it's good for my body. I don't enjoy it. However, being forced to run 3, 4, 5, 6 miles and train like I'm a cross-country athlete, guess what that did for me on the other side? Made me, oh my God, I was in the best shape of my life. And I never appreciated how much easier the game of basketball was when I'm in tip-top shape. Like literally, I could just run for days up and down the court. So again, there's trade-offs. And I think today I'm able to see that in real time, in real life too, that although I may not love to do something, what's the benefit that will come from this? There's stuff you do and I do in our jobs and in our work that we don't love, but we realize it's part of the process and what's going to happen on the other side of that thing. So that's one of the skills that I feel like I gain from sports and that I use regularly.
I love it. How about involvement in sports today? I'm assuming you haven't walked away completely.
Yeah, I've not walked away. So over the years, I've coached a lot of team sports, a lot of youth sports. Coached, let's see, soccer. I was completely not qualified for that, by the way.
Yeah.
I was able to take our team with the help of my co-head coach, who actually knew what he was talking about, but his English was just a little challenged. So we took that team to an 0-8 record.
Wow.
Yes, it was the worst season I've ever been a part of.
Well, humbling.
Yes, very humbling. I felt bad for all those girls, including my daughter. Coached baseball when my kid was like, kindergarten and first grade. Coached him in soccer a little bit. And for the most part, over the last 5 or 6 years, dating back to when I coached your son, I've been a basketball coach. So coaching my kids, my son's basketball teams is how I continue to stay involved. I don't watch nearly as much stuff as I used to watch. I mean, as a kid, I used to watch baseball a lot. I mean, I can tell you all about the Pittsburgh team and the Atlanta Braves and Chicago Cubs because they came on either TBS or WGN. It was like the two, I don't know how it worked with cable, but somehow we had like those two channels. So I remember the National League games quite a bit. I watched a lot of tennis, Andre Agassi and Martina Hingis, Martina Navratilova, Ivan Lendl, right? I watched a lot of tennis. Now I really don't watch a whole lot of sports except when it's my kid's event or if it just happens to be a big game. Like I have a cousin who plays big time college football and I was able to go see a game down in Austin not too long ago, one of the CFP games. And so that was real cool just to be in person for that. So for the most part, that's kind of where I spend my time with sports these days is coaching my son's basketball team. And that's it's got its ups and downs, but for the most part it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It makes me sad. I was watching a documentary about the rivalry between Bird and Johnson. And I'm just like, the hatred that they had for each other, like just, and kind of.
You're talking about Magic.
It's just,
Yeah.
It's just not the same anymore. It makes me sad because I'm the same way. I used to watch it 24/7.
Right.
Now I'm like, what's happening?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they basically hug after the game now, which, there's a part of that I can actually appreciate. That is not like, I mean, I do remember there was a couple players, I can name their names, but like after games, they like got machetes and knives and, were trying to like hurt people.
Yeah.
That's sometimes how intense the anger used to be. I mean, teams really hated other teams and the fans really hated other, the opposing team in a major way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different, right? Things transition.
And how about leaders? Do you see, as you work with leaders and with Bonafide Leaders, do you see a correlation? Do you find that people get leadership a little differently? Or is there, for those who are former athletes versus who don't have that athlete experience?
I don't know that I do, Erin, except maybe in the analogies that people use.
Okay.
You can kind of get a sense that, okay, I've been working with this person for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months. They've never even mentioned anything related to sports. Okay, maybe they're not a sports person. But in terms of one thing that I would say that I've seen with most athletes who find their way through success, and I should be clear because I want to make this distinction like, oh, if I grow up playing sports, I'll be really successful in my life. I don't think it's just an automatic like that. Or if I play these sports, I'll have no problem interviewing and getting into the company of my choice. I can tell you, I've interviewed a few people who had great resumes from a sports perspective, but bombed it in the interview. So it's not an exact correlation. And I can tell you why they bombed it. Because guess what? When you're a college student athlete, that's your full-time job. You and I know it. Yeah. People don't understand that, but it's your full-time job. Pre-NIL, pre-name, image, and likeness, open transfer portal and social media. And it's a 1-year renewable scholarship, right? And that's your full-time job. So I get why they're not able to go and spend time, for example, at the career center, the way that, if you're not doing sports at school, you got time to go do that, right? If you're typically carrying a load. So I think what I see is that the people who find their way through and have success and do really well, they tend to have some of what we've talked about: discipline, an ability to focus and isolate pressure and attention, and the ability to perform under pressure. Mm-hmm. You and I know that, you've been in gyms with thousands of people watching you, free throws at the end of a game. What are you going to do? Yeah. Are you able to step up there and knock it down, even when the people behind you are waving all kind of things and screaming all kind of crazy things? So I think that the people who are able to really have success with sports and all the way through their business and leadership career, they tend to have that discipline, the perseverance, the ability to focus, the ability to execute. I think attention to detail. There's so many, I didn't realize how technical the game of basketball was. Yeah. And I didn't realize this as a player because I just practice and practice and practice. But as I coach my son and his team, there's a lot that I have to teach about, if you want to get an arc on your shot, right? You got to open up your hand and you got to get your elbow in. You got to use your legs. And these are 7th, 8th graders now. And those same things they may not have gotten, younger. So anyway, I think that's typically what I see, Erin, is the people who have a ton of success all the way through, they've got those skills that we just talked about.
All right. And anything else we want to say for the listener to get ready for season 3?
Hey, get your popcorn. Get your popcorn. It's going to be exciting. Again, we've got some fabulous guests lined up. And they're going to be able to speak to not only their personal involvement with sports and how it's impacted them, but how that affects the way that they lead, how they think, how they run their businesses. And I just think there's something for everybody. So I just really encourage everybody to tune in, subscribe, and it's going to be a strong season.
I love it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this podcast, don't keep it a secret. Subscribe, leave a rating or a review, and share it with someone you know. Until next time, remember, our world is starving for bona fide leaders. Take your leadership to the next level by applying at least one thing you heard today.